In a world where left is up and right is apparently wrong, do souls make sense of it all, or at least have fun trying? Gear up, friends, for Chicken and the Dog.
Welcome to another episode of Chicken and the Dog. I am the dog, and with me, as always, is the guy that is sometimes preferred over red meat, the chicken. What up, Doug?
The most popular flavor in your world.
Yeah, well, speaking of red meat, this is going to be the episode that we are going to
Cut into
recap.
Bevo.
Yeah, cut into Bevo. We're going to recap Texas season. So we are going to recap Texas season. And I mean, for their first year in the SEC, good job. I mean, you got to give it to them, man. They did pretty freaking good for their first year in the SEC. But before we do, I'm going to kind of turn it over to the chicken, because for anybody that's new, that's listening to us, in the last couple months, the chicken's just going to give you guys a kind of an update of who we are. What are we about? So proceed.
We are your ambassadors of genius to the SEC, to all things SEC football. We'll talk about some of the other stuff, but it's not football, so it doesn't get as much of attention. The dog, as many of you may have noticed, is a very lovable creature, very loyal, but he likes to hang out with his tongue wagging for no apparent reason. Maybe in the shade, maybe rolling in the centipede grass. I don't know, and that's not the point. The point is that he sticks true to who he is, and he's a likable guy, so he's always going to defend the listener. I, on the other hand, the chicken, I am always ready to fight, and you will lose. Enough said.
All right. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. You know, those are kind of our those personalities aren't just really with our characters. It's kind of really who we are in real life. Just that lovable guy, and the guy that's gonna set you straight if you veer off wrong.
Yes, I will hold you accountable.
That's for sure. And we love him for that most times. So look, I'm just gonna start talking about. I'm gonna go through the season for Texas, and just and then we'll kind of break it down a little bit. If you did notice that we do not have Dawg on this show with us today, it's unfortunate. Nothing happened to him. He's good, but he had to step away. He's got some other stuff he's got to take care of, and we wanted to get this episode out so we could start doing forecast shows starting next week. But the Texas Longhorns, in my opinion, opened up the SEC with a very soft schedule. They opened up with Colorado State, beat them 52-0. Then they took on a number 10 Michigan and beat them 31-12. So everybody was like, "Look, man, they could be really good." Or is Michigan really that bad? And I think Michigan was just not that good, except when they played Ohio State. But that's another subject that's not for the show. Then they took on a UT San Antonio, beat them 57-7. Then they took on University Louisiana Monroe, beat them 51-3. They took on Mississippi State and beat them 35-13. Those last three games were won by Arch Manning, the future. Then they took on a number 18 Oklahoma at the Red River rivalry.
Good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those words usually run together when I say it too fast. But anyway, they took on Oklahoma, and that's always been an interesting game, whether it's in the Big 12 or the SEC or whatever. But we're glad that rivalry is now in the SEC. It's good. It's a big college football moment. And they beat Oklahoma, handled them, man, 34-3. They just throttled them jokers. Then there's a team that's loved by one of us that went to Austin, Texas, as we discussed last week, Georgia, and we delivered the Longhorns' first loss, 30-15. Then they took on a number 25 Vandy, and they won 27-24. That was close. Then they took on the Fighting Flobies in Florida, beat them 49-17. That was a throttle. Then they took on the Fighting Pittmans in Arkansas, and they won that game as well to 20-10. Then they took on Kentucky and beat them 31-14. And then this game was very anticipated. We talked about this game quite a bit, going into the week of this game, of this actual game. And it was a big deal. People in the state of Texas have been waiting on this game for a long time, the return of this game, which was at the time a number 20 A&M in College Station. They were doing some yell practice, but it wasn't enough. It didn't work. They won that. The Longhorns won that game 17-7. It was a very fun game to watch. There was no doubt about that. And then they're going into the SEC championship with one loss. And then they had to go to Atlanta, which was an hour and 15 minutes away from the motherland of Athens, GA. And Georgia rolled in there and beat them 22-19 in overtime. So Georgia delivered their only two losses of the season. So regular season, they were 11-1. SEC championship, they did their second loss, and then they went to the playoffs. And this is where the Longhorns did pretty well. They took on Clemson and beat them 38-24. Good job. Clemson was playing some pretty good football towards the end. Cade Kublicks was really coming around as the starting quarterback, that leader of that program. But Quinn Ewers did what Quinn Ewers does, man, and he put his team on the back, and they won that game. Then they took on the old Fighting Scataboos. And, man, what a game, man. That game was stupid fun to watch. But the Longhorns prevailed 39-31 in second overtime. And then they took on the reigning national champions with the Ohio State Buckeyes, and they lost 28-14. But Quinn Ewers, again, never stopped fighting, even in that game, man. Quinn Ewers was very impressive this last season. But all in all, fantastic year for your first time playing big boy football. We're glad you're in the SEC. At least I am.
Yeah, a solid show by the Longhorns this year. All right. Glad to have you in the conference. Certainly, they put on a better first-year outing than their friends in Norman, Oklahoma. Didn't work out quite as well for the Sooners this year. But I think we brought in two really good football programs, not just historically, but the ability to come into this conference and compete. Obviously, Texas competed right off the rip, going all the way to Atlanta this past season. But I think Oklahoma is probably going to be in the mix. I don't know how quickly they'll arrive, but I think both of these schools bring a lot to this conference. Quinn Ewers had an all-SEC type of season. Now, what do I mean by that? We don't know what he's going to look like in the NFL, but you have players that come around that just get it done every Saturday during their time in this storied conference. And I believe during their first year, all the pressure that was on this team to perform, all the pressure that was on Quinn Ewers to perform. It's not like Arch Manning showed up 5 minutes before kickoff against Colorado State. Like, Quinn Ewers knew that there was that guy waiting right behind him, that all he needed was 5 minutes of your time, and he could sell you a timeshare today. Quinn Ewers went into this season having that type of pressure on him, and he delivered every week that he was on the field.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, man. He's a gamer. And we got to keep in mind, man, Quinn Ewers is a young quarterback. And when I mean young, I'm actually talking about his age. he left high school after his junior year and went to the Buckeyes and sat for 1 year. They redshirted him, and then he immediately came to Texas and took on, grabbed the bull by its horns, or bevo, and really did a pretty good job there, man. So he's a little younger than as far as age wise, but man, you couldn't tell it on the field. The boy knows how to play football, man. But before we start diving into the individual games, and we talked about good addition to the SEC or whatever. As you could probably see, I'm not in my studio at home. I am on the road working, and so I went and saw. I had to go see someone today. Met a guy for the first time at the plant. And he, we started talking about football, SEC football. He's a Missouri guy. I know, I explained to him about the Chickens' love for their head coach.
Wrong.
And anyway, he started, we started talking about different things, and he said something about Texas and, being in the, I said, yeah, they're in the SEC now. He goes, that's right, they are. And he goes, do you think the SEC will stop at 16? And I go, I don't know, man. I said, I actually believe that they will probably add 2 more. I don't know if they'll go 4 more, but they'll probably grow 2 more, because I think, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit in the past, I think they want to get into that North Carolina, Virginia market. So they could go after a NC and even a Virginia Tech. And he was like, wow, so yeah, him and I had that conversation about adding teams to the SEC.
Yeah, that's lovely. Did he scratch you behind your ears?
My tail wagged a little bit.
Your tail wagged a little bit.
Yeah, it did.
No, if you're going to talk continued build out of this conference, certainly Texas and Oklahoma gave us some solid cornerstones to continue that growth. The seasons that both of them had, even Oklahoma coming out 6-6 with their final record this season, had a good enough showing that any other school that would be targeted by the SEC, be it a North Carolina, be it a Virginia Tech, can sit there and say, hey, Oklahoma went in and fared pretty well their first year. They didn't light any fireworks off, but they fared well. And look what Texas did their first year in the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
We think that with an invitation, we could go compete too.
Yeah, they did. And, I don't know if this has, and this, I guess this is maybe some of the forecast show or not, but since we're talking about the addition of them to the SEC and who benefited from that, I think the SEC benefited from it, but I think Texas benefited from it as well, being in the SEC versus the Big 12. I think throughout the season, it prepared them to face hard, bigger schools, or harder teams, because it's not, you don't have a whole lot of warm-up games in the SEC as far as conference games. All your conference games are any given Saturday for the most part. The Mississippi States this year, and some of the other ones like Kentucky was not that great this year. So except when they played Georgia, but we won't go there. But anyway, let me get real quick. So what I was going to say is, I think they benefited. The other thing I think they benefited from was, now I know that this doesn't always mean anything, but they're the number 1 recruiting class coming in, out of 2025 recruits. Texas is. Does them going to the SEC, did that help that? And I say yes.
Oh, absolutely. Even if it only helped Sark and his crew in the living rooms when they're making those closing pitches to these young men and their families of, we play in the Southeastern Conference. Not only are we Texas, but we play in the SEC, the premier college football conference in the country. Texas has benefited from this more so, I think, than anybody. Even to the point where the SEC gave them a gift to come in, which was arguably the easiest conference schedule we have ever seen.
For sure.
Coming into this particular schedule, Okay, your first rip in the SEC is Mississippi State, followed by Oklahoma, which is not like Texas is surprised. They've been recruiting against Oklahoma their entire lives. So these two teams know what the other has. And Texas certainly knew, I think we're going to be okay. Okay. Vanderbilt, Florida is not on their best right now. Arkansas, Kentucky. Kentucky is typically competitive, but not competitive enough to consider if you're Texas. The only two games that are really on your schedule going into next season are Georgia and Texas A&M. Georgia, because right now in the modern era of college football, Georgia is Georgia, and that means something. Texas A&M is not only your rival, but they've been competitive in the Southeastern Conference. They've been one of those schools that you talk about going into every season. So those are your only two games of note on your entire conference schedule. And then you throw in Colorado State, Texas San Antonio, and Louisiana Monroe. Give me a break. I'll give you a push on Michigan and the value of that opponent. They were coming off of a championship season, so there's that. But really, this is not much of a schedule to hang your hat on other than, well, at least they're SEC schools.
Yeah, they're SEC school. They must because Texas was the highest revenue school out of all of college football as far as media rights and stuff like that. Their program generated more money than even Alabama did. And part of it is because ESPN had their own Longhorn network, right? And so coming in, so the SEC wanted that money. They wanted that notoriety, all that stuff that went with it. But they must have, because that must have been a handshake deal coming in. It's like, look, if you come over, we will give you an easy schedule. Kind of like what happened in the NBA this year with the trade for Luka. That is the most ridiculous. I know we're not an NBA show, but that's one of the most ridiculous trades ever in the history of NBA. And made absolutely no sense. LeBron must have done something. And then next thing you know, the Dallas Mavericks had a 1% chance of getting the number one draft pick. And what did they get? The number one draft pick. So I think there must have been some backdoor deals with Texas on this, because you're right. If you look at the schedule that they had to play, you knew they were going to play. They knew they were going to have to play A&M. That was going to be a game that had to happen. Other than that, who else did they play besides Georgia? They didn't play Alabama, South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss. They didn't play any of the 4 or 5 teams that are big, the big boys besides Georgia. They did. They had a cupcake schedule, and they have a cupcake schedule again this year. But hopefully, welcome to the SEC. You got beat by Georgia twice.
Yeah. How much of this do you think stemmed from the fact that Texas had a Manning? Ooh. And the SEC wanted to keep the lineage intact, the heritage intact, that all Mannings come through the Southeastern Conference. So therefore, Texas was able to essentially hold this poor young man hostage and ransom an easy cupcake schedule.
Look, man, I didn't even think about the Manning kid on this deal, man. And so that's kind of a good point. Now, I think the Manning deal, I think them coming to the SEC was already done before the Manning deal, before he went to Texas. I could be wrong.
That's what makes it funny to think about now.
Oh. I don't think very well.
This is true.
So, but let's go back. Let's go back. Let's talk about Arch Manning, right? So, he is the future, and we'll talk about him next week when we talk about the Forecast Show. However, he did play in he started and played 3 full games when Ewers went down, which I think in itself, getting into, we'll go talk about Quinn Ewers in a minute, but Ewers has been out every year that he played at Texas. He got hurt and missed some games every year. So I think that's going to probably played some factor in his recruiting, not his recruiting, but his drafting going to the NFL. But Arch Manning played in 3 games: UT San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe, and an SEC school, Mississippi State.
A gauntlet schedule for the young man.
Yes, I know. But look, he still threw for 223 yards, 258 yards, and against Mississippi State, 325 yards. Now, against Mississippi State, Carson Beck threw for almost 500 yards. So their defense does, their defense allows a lot of passes, I guess. But all in all, I mean, we did kind of get a look on what Arch is going to do this year.
And those were the only 3 games where you had the opportunity to get that look. I know he took snaps and he was in on specifically designed plays throughout the season. But those 3 games are the only 3 that you actually get to see what type of quarterback Arch wants to be and how Texas is going to use him. Because every other time, if Arch came in the game, it was going to be a quarterback run.
Oh, yeah. It was extremely predictable.
It was exceptionally. You're like, it's a Manning. He's going to drop back and throw, right? Nah, he's going to scramble for about 3 or 4 yards at best.
I know when he came in for Georgia, when they played Georgia the first time in Austin, they actually pulled Quinn Ewers out and put Arch in. I think to start the second half or right after their first drive in the second half, and let him hand the ball. And man, that he saw them Georgia defensive boys coming after him. He looked scared. Which, do you blame him? I would be too.
The only time that a Manning running the football surprised anyone was when it was Peyton.
Yes.
Because Peyton, you were so used to seeing him drop back and work the pocket, find the open man. And then when he's with the Broncos, I think is when they started doing it. I'm sure he did it a few times when he was with the Colts, where all of a sudden Peyton fakes a handoff and rolls out because nobody expects that old guy to limp into the end zone. And that's exactly what he would do. With Arch, yeah, we knew that they were going to let you try and run the dive. We all saw it coming, big guy.
Yeah, I hope I hope that in the upcoming season, Arch is smart enough to know I can't scramble and run all the time because I'm going to get killed. Well, maybe 2 out of the 10 games he'll get destroyed because everybody else is, well, except for week 1, and we'll talk more about that. But my Lord, they got a team to play on week 1 this year. But Quinn Ewers had a great season, man. They threw the ball all over the place, man. There was never that one receiver. There was never that one running back. Georgia needs to take a little bit from this playbook, right? And spread the ball out some, I think, more, but also allow people to get into a rhythm. The one thing that they had that Georgia did not have, let's just say on the running game, was they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games just in the regular season, plus the SEC championship. So out of 5 out of 13 games, they had a running back get over 100 yards. That happened one time in Georgia last season. Yeah. Not good. So
I think Sark and the way that he's going to shape this Texas team, continue to shape this Texas team, I should say, is going to look a lot like Nick Saban and his time at Alabama. They're going to build to where they play solid defense. They're going to run the ball. Now, does that mean a workhorse like Saban was known for doing in Bama? I don't necessarily think so. I think Sark likes the ability to run by committee, but they're going to be a powerful ground game in the Southeastern Conference for sure. And then it never hurts to have a Manning in your backfield.
No, I don't think so. We'll see how long he stays, 1 or 2 years. I think he'll be there. I think he'll be there till he graduates. Or, you never know what's going to happen with college football. They may just let people stay forever.
We just love it so much just to make a career out of it.
Yeah. You are a super duper senior.
There you go.
Yeah. Look, so let's talk. How bad did they get hit by the portal?
Oh my. In the portal, they have lost 14. All but one has decided where they're going to go.
Oh, really?
Yep. At this point in time,
Okay.
they lost a total of 8 solely to graduation. Now, some of these other players that went in the NFL draft, they may have graduated too. I don't know all the specifics about their academia over there, but 8 players that were just lost because they graduated out. 14 to the NFL.
Wow, good for you guys.
Well, here's where it gets fun. 4 out of their starting 5 offensive linemen,
Ooh.
they're all in the NFL now.
So let me ask you this. Has Sark had time, or was it already in place before he got there to have the depth to overcome something like that?
They're not hurting when it comes to depth. The only player, for example, and I know that this isn't the end-all be-all, but looking at the quarterback room, the only player that they lost from last year is Quinn Ewers. He went into the NFL. Every other player, 4 deep behind Quinn, still there at Texas. They did not get hit hard in the running back room. Wisner is still there. Baxter is still there. He's in question about being ready for the season to start, but he's still in there. Jaden Blue, NFL draft. So that's when you get 3 deep, air quote 3 deep for Texas. They just used everybody in that room. You hit the NFL guy.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Wisner was a true freshman, right? That kid was a stud, man.
That is correct. That is correct.
He killed it, man. So, but their offensive line, they lost 3 out of the 4.
No, they lost 4 out of their 5.
I mean, 4 out of their 5.
Yep.
Okay.
The entire left side of the line went to the NFL draft, both the left tackle and left guard, NFL draft. Jake Majors, the center, NFL draft. Right tackle Cameron Williams, NFL draft. 4 out of 5 starting O-linemen in the NFL.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Now that sucks if you're Arch and now you got to stand behind new people. But that's still impressive that many of their offensive linemen went into the NFL draft.
Well, and let's just look at the talent, or at least what we expect of that talent that's filling in those gaps. And I'm not talking about players that have transferred in. That'll be in for the next show. But you've got a redshirt freshman, Trevor Gooseby, 4-star. A sophomore, Nito Umizula. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Another 4-star. Cole Hudson, a 4-star. Brandon Baker, a 5-star. They got depth at the O-line position.
Yeah, they're good. They are good.
They gonna be all right.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty good, man. Sark's doing some good things over there in Texas, man. So, we talked about last week. You talked about quite a bit, and about who's gonna take that torch, man, the mantle in the SEC as far as head coach. And yes, we all think that Kirby should be or is probably leading the pack on that, but I don't know, man. With the numbers that Sark is producing out there in Texas and Austin, he could take it. Texas could end up being the team in the SEC. I hope not. I hope it's Georgia, but man, Sark's doing some good stuff, man. I don't think it's long before he wins a natty out there.
There are a lot of interesting schools to look at in this conference right now. I don't know that there's ever been a better time in the SEC for out and out competition at the top. I mean, when you look at it, obviously you've got Texas, you've got Alabama, you've got Georgia, Tennessee lately, and we both have our feelings about what's coming, but lately they've been up there. But look at the teams that are almost there. Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss nipping at the heels, right? Like Lane's been fighting to get in that top tier for a few years. Is this the time? South Carolina starting to make some moves. Missouri, the hated one, but they always play strong for some particular reason. Not even really sure what Floby's got going on down in Florida right now. Are they going to be back in the mix? it's such a competition-rich environment in this conference right now. It just gives you goosebumps.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And you're right. It's not that one or two teams. It's not, before, when we had the East and the West, right? The divisions within the conference. It was always Georgia, Florida ran, they ran ruckshot on, sometimes Tennessee, just depending on the year, but it was usually Georgia, Florida that was going to own the East, and then you had Alabama and Alabama. Um, so they was pretty much always the favorites that's going to win the West, right? Now that it's open, I think that has a little bit to do with it, but right now you have 5 or 6 teams that can compete with any of them. Right now, you don't have those 2 or 3 like you did several years ago, and I think Texas is part of that. I think South Carolina is part of that. Georgia and Alabama, and LSU and Ole Miss, all of those teams have a legitimate shot at beating anyone. Question is this: why? Why is there more now than there was 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
In the conference?
Yeah. Why is there more teams that have the ability to win it all, or to win the conference, or to beat anyone in there? There's not that 1 or 2 teams that dominate the conference. There's 5 or 6 that can dominate the conference. That's new to the SEC. Why?
I think that you've run into a time in college football and a time for the Southeastern Conference, and I'll define that in a second, that is just the perfect storm to allow a conference like the SEC to own college football, but to also have the most open competition at the top. What happened in decades prior of college football is, if you were a great recruiter like a Bobby Bowden, or if you were a great name like a Bear Bryant or a Steve Spurrier, that would bring the top talent to your school. And if you had a staff that could help coach those players along, you would be competitive. You might even own the conference, might even own college football if you're Bear Bryant. Nick Saban was able to benefit off of that. The landscape changed with NIL. It allowed these players to be recruited for a lot of different reasons, up to and including a paycheck at a given school, creating more competition for those players to say, well, yeah, if it was only about a championship for me, only about playing for a Nick Saban, then I'd go to Bama. But it's about more than that for me. So they give the other schools more of a fair shot, right? Like, man, I might not get to play at Georgia. I'm a 4-star, but I might be 3rd on the depth chart at Georgia. But I might be able to start at South Carolina. And South Carolina can be competitive from, I'll go there for this much money. And it's that whole perfect environment, the transfer portal. If it doesn't work out, I can jump ship. If I choose to go to an Alabama to win a championship, but I'm 3rd on the depth chart, maybe I give a shot to a Kentucky, or I give a shot to a Georgia or a Florida, and they transfer around. There's just so much opportunity to create this mix-up of teams. It's a lot like watching professional baseball. And are you going to sign a 1-year contract with that left-handed reliever? Or are you going to take a swing with this kid out of your farm system, this amazing shortstop? I don't know. It gets crazy.
Yeah. I actually wrote down, and you hit the nail on the head. It took you a ways to get all the way around that, but it was perfectly said. I think it has to do with the portal and the NIL. I think the NIL, I think the portal has opened up the opportunity for teams like a South Carolina, and definitely an Ole Miss, to be competitive and be in that mix all the time now, because like you said, yeah, you can go to Alabama or Georgia or an Ohio State or something like that. And yeah, you have a chance of putting on a ring on that finger. There's a good chance. But did you contribute to that? If you're third or fourth deep in there, on the depth chart, because there's that many good players on those kind of teams, but you might be, this close as good as the number one. You just got four guys that are unbelievable, and you may not have the right chemistry with the coach or the OC or the defensive coordinator, whatever it might be. But you could say, well, I'm going to bounce, and I can go to an Ole Miss or South Carolina or LSU or Kentucky or Arkansas or Florida, whoever, and make a difference right off the rip. I was in Houston, Texas this week. I got there Monday. Tuesday night, I went to go eat at one of my favorite cantinas. They've got fantastic quesadillas. And I was sitting at the bar, as I do a lot. And I started talking to this lady, man, and
You were talking to a lady, or you were talking to a lady man?
She didn't have pronouns, I don't think. So okay. I'm just going to say lady.
Just checking.
Yeah. I was talking to this lady, and I said, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And she had a son that is a true freshman, tight end at Arkansas State. And she was telling me that that her son was recruited by a lot of people. Kirby Smart was in her living room. And I said, how was he? He goes, he was fantastic. He's the one thing that I love about Kirby Smart than a lot of the other coaches that came in and tried to recruit my son is that you knew where he stood. He was honest. He was upfront. And he goes, the main reason he didn't go to Georgia is because Kirby wanted him to play linebacker. He wanted to play the defense. He wanted to play tight end. He was like 6'3" and 235 pounds. He's a big kid, man, as a true freshman. So anyway, he chose Arkansas State. And I asked her, I said, well, I asked her the question. I said, if he gets into Arkansas State and he does have a good year this upcoming season, or even his sophomore season, would he jump in the portal to go after a bigger school, for bigger NIL money? Just asked the question. And she said, no, he won't. He's going to stick it out. She goes, because his end game was to have enough exposure. So he chose Arkansas State so he can start out from the rip. He'll start tight end. He'll get the exposure, and hopefully within 3 years he's in the NFL.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was their take. Their end game was NFL.
Right. So this kid's got a definite plan, and it means going to a smaller school to shine to up that draft stock. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that was pretty impressive. I thought that was pretty neat, man. Yeah, she was and she has a daughter. She said she had a daughter that was going next year, got a scholarship to Arkansas State. I'm going to be honest, I can't remember what sport it was because it wasn't football. So no offense to her. I hope, I told her about the podcast, so maybe she's listening. If you are, I didn't mean anything about, nothing about your daughter, but your story about your son was very impressive to me. Yeah. So, but I think you're right. I think the portal and NIL has just completely changed the landscape of allowing. It did that in the SEC, but I don't think it's done that in the Big Ten.
Not to the same extent, but if you look at what the Big Ten is now, because all of this comes back to money, right? And I think that's why we've seen the absolute failing of the Pac-12.
Yes.
And we talk about the Big Ten. Well, what did they get? They got Oregon. They got UCLA, right? Like they got Washington.
And now Nico.
And now Nico, right? But you've had these other traditionally solid championship contending, conference championship contending programs that are also coming into the Big Ten. Yes, we believe that the SEC is by far the better conference. But I would argue that the Big Ten is getting competitive. Certainly they're the closest second.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And I actually think give it 1 or 2 more years, and the Big Ten is not done growing. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Right.
They're going after Notre Dame. They want Notre Dame bad. And if there's going to be a conference that's going to steal Notre Dame or pick them up, it's going to be the Big Ten. I don't think it'll be the ACC.
No, I agree with you on that. I think geographically it makes more sense for Notre Dame to be in the Big Ten, but we'll see. They've got that independent contract money that they really like holding on to up there in South Bend.
Yeah, they do. But the only problem with that is how many. It's going to be tough for them to get in. I mean, I think it lessens their opportunity to get into a 12-team playoff if they stick with 12. If they go to 16, then they might just stay independent and say, "This is what I'm going to do." Who knows?
So, speaking of Notre Dame, here is your chicken scratch moment for this episode, brought to you by Off the Chain Kennels, OTC Kennels on Facebook and Instagram. My question is this. We have a new American Pope. If I say we, I'm not Catholic. But there's a new American Pope. Is he a Notre Dame Pope? Is he a Boston College Pope?
I can't. I wouldn't even begin to guess because that's what it would be.
Is he a Holy Cross Pope? Or does he just like Bama?
I'm gonna. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a guess. So, listeners, I'm sure some of you probably know the answer to that, and we would welcome you to respond to either email or just on one of the reels or make a comment on there, because we've been getting some pretty interesting comments, and I'll gather all those up and we'll talk about some of the comments on next week's show when we do the forecast show from Texas, because we're getting a lot of comments on some of our things, man, and they're very informative. Some of them are very funny. I like them. You tickle the dog with some of those comments, man, and that's always great. Any comment that you want to poke fun at the chicken, we welcome those because he'll poke back.
That's right.
So, look, man, I really, as far as Texas season, man, I think they had a fantastic year. I know that they didn't win the SEC, but they were the better team in the long run in the SEC this past year. I know I said that Georgia was the best because they won the SEC, but man, they went 11-1 in regular season, man, and that's just impressive. That's very good. Welcome to the SEC. I don't have anything else if you don't.
I'm all crowed out.
All right, guys, love us, like us, follow us. Make sure you're following us. If you are watching anything on YouTube or whatever, make sure you hit that follow button, man, because that is how we grow. We love you. Deuces.
Bye.